Hello everybody. I don't think there is such a thing as a bad day to be in a Rolls Royce, but this is a particularly good one. We're at the end of summer now and a storm is brewing. The wind is up, the sky is darkening, and so David's timing is fantastic. For today, he has brought me his 2012 Rolls Royce Ghost, a car that I have myself been eyeing up for quite some time. Because every time I do drive a Rolls Royce and review one, it generally ends with something like, this is a really lovely car, but you have to be into it to justify the running costs of what is ultimately not actually that fast or that fancy. The Ghost, though, sits perfectly at that intersection between the old and the new, because prices have dropped to the point where if you could afford an RS6, you could easily afford one of these. But they're still new enough that both the performance and the features will impress just about anybody. And in today's video, not only am I going to be giving you a thorough evaluation of the first generation of Ghost, I am also going to be making the case as to why I think this is not just a better car, but also a more sensible purchase than a Porsche Taycan. Yeah, wish me luck. So then, to begin with, what is a Rolls Royce Ghost? This was the second model introduced by the firm after their takeover by BMW. And, just in case you weren't aware, for a very long time in the history of both firms, Rolls-Royce and Bentley were intertwined, with the two having started independently, but then in the 1930s becoming conjoined before finally being separated at the tail end of the 1990s and the turn of the millennium. And I have told this story before in many a video, so I'll give you today the condensed version. BMW had been working with Rolls-Royce, supplying them engines and things for a little while, and so, when the firm came up for sale, everybody expected that they were going to be the buyer. And indeed, they made an offer for it. But not as good an offer as that VW did. Some complicated things then followed, and what happened was that BMW took away effectively the rights to the Rolls-Royce name, the Spirit of Ecstasy, and the grille, but just about nothing else. Not the factory, not the cars, nada. They had to start afresh. Whereas VW got Bentley, they got the Rolls-Royce Bentley plant at Crewe, the rights to the old 6 3/4 litre engine, and the existing model range. BMW, though, had none of this advantage. They instead had to start completely afresh, and they did so by building a brand new facility at Goodwood, where the firm is still headquartered to this day. The very first product that they built was the 7th generation Phantom, then powered by a 6 3/4 litre badged version of the BMW V12. I have driven one and I can confirm it is a magnificent beast, and was a fine way for Rolls-Royce to reintroduce itself to the world under its new ownership. There was, though, just one teeny-weeny problem. The Phantom was a great car, with an even greater price tag. The one I drove, we believe, when new, cost some £400,000. And that's over a decade ago. A lot of money. An amount that meant they were never ever going to sell that car in the volume they required to make a sustainable business. So, fairly early on, they realised the Phantom had to be joined by a slightly smaller and marginally more affordable sibling. And that's this, the Ghost. To keep costs down, they did share some parts with a BMW of the day, the 7 Series, specifically the F01 generation. And BMW themselves will admit that there is some 20% of parts commonality between the two. But trust me, they are very, very different animals. First off, though this is built on a 7 Series platform, it is a bespoke and extended version, with this, the short wheelbase version of the Ghost, being 5.4 meters long. So it is bigger than the long wheelbase version of the 7 Series. It is just shy of 2 meters wide, and to sit in, you do wonder why Rolls-Royce ever bothered building the Cullinan, because it already feels like you're in an SUV. This thing is massive, though weirdly not massively daunting. You can see a lot of that rather prodigious bonnet, and it means you can place it fairly easily. You of course also have reversing cameras, sensors and the like, and as this is a fair bit smaller than a Phantom, I am told this is just about tolerable for driving around places like London. You get into a Phantom and you have to do a lot of forward planning. The styling of the car, as you would expect of any Rolls-Royce, is restrained yet elegant, and it is instantly recognisable. Not just because of the big trademark grille and the spirit of ecstasy atop it, but simply the proportions of the thing. You look at it and it is clearly a Rolls-Royce. The Ghost was first introduced in 2009, with this 2012 being a prime example of the Series 1 car that was in production until 2014. It was then facelifted with some subtle exterior modifications made, so the lights were changed. These early ones are more rectangular, the later ones a little more interesting in their shape. There were other detail changes too. The interior specification got a little bit better, and that's when the car got the GPS-guided automatic gearbox. That Series 2 car was then in production until 2019, when the model was then replaced entirely by the second generation Ghost, which featured a number of key changes, including the fact it was then built on a bespoke platform as per the Phantom and the other cars in the Rolls-Royce lineup. This Ghost though did spawn a couple of other very important cars for the firm, including the Wraith, which turned out to be wildly popular. That is their coupe. I've driven it and gotta say, do kind of love it, and also the Dawn, essentially the convertible version of the same thing. But for me, if I was going to buy a Rolls-Royce, I'd want it to be for those in the back, and so I would have to buy the 4-door, even though the massive suicide doors of the Wraith are seriously cool. This does still have a similar setup in the back, and also a button for you to electronically close them, so you don't have to get out and reach and close your own door like a peasant. Even the front doors have a very subtle system in them, so that when you push it shut, it actually helps you, meaning you require only fingertip lightness to close the thing. It naturally also has soft close on top, double glazing, and a whole host of details, some small, some large, to remind you of why it is that you bought a Rolls-Royce and not a 7 Series. For example, though the car still has plenty of technology in here, a version of BMW's brilliant iDrive system, by default it is hidden away. The dash has 3 simple but beautifully made dials: the classic power reserve, the speedo, and your fuel combined with temperature. They are black on white here, and I really rather like them. Below that you then have a little digital setup giving you all of your other basic information, including things like gear, your mileage counter, remaining range, etc, etc. Oh, it would appear this actually has a 360-degree camera, which is quite nice. Helps too, because visibility otherwise is not great, it has to be said. As you would find still in the cars from the boys at Crew, you've got organ stoppers for your air vents, which themselves are also beautiful, real metal items. Your switches also are bespoke, and even little things I appreciate, like the dials down here for the aircon. It doesn't have low, medium and high. Instead it has soft, medium and high. I like that. The little clock over here looks like an old-fashioned pocket watch and is in of itself a work of art. Okay, nowhere near as ludicrous as the gallery, a feature you can get in some of the newer cars where they will basically make a piece of art for your dashboard. All of the materials in here are really rather nice. There is not a piece of cheap, scratchy black plastic to be found just about anywhere, with the exception maybe of this little light switch up here, but even that is nice and smooth. They clearly have thought a lot about this car. And of course, this being a Rolls-Royce, we cannot talk about it without discussing the back seats. And even though this is the short wheelbase version of the small Rolls-Royce, it is still very generous indeed. You have more than enough legroom for just about anybody, though headroom is on occasion a little tighter than you might expect. But unless you're Shaquille O'Neal doing some stretches, I think you'll be just fine. There are nice, elegant and beautifully constructed picnic tables, which I am certain, like all picnic tables, will never actually be used for a picnic. You also have your classic rear entertainment screens and little old school touches like mirrors, so you can just check you've got nothing in your teeth before you get snapped by the paparazzi. In this door, you'll also find a Rolls Royce umbrella, yours for just £750. It is kept in a nice ventilated and heated pocket, so when you put away, no matter how damp it is, when you go to get it, it will be nice, dry and not mouldy. I have done a short stint in there already and can tell you that it is a wonderful place to be. Roomy, airy. I love the fact this has a sunroof. You don't actually see it in many of these. Instead, people tend to opt for the fiber optic starlight effect, which is nice enough, but this gives you real stars. That turning circle is actually really good, considering the scale of the car. Very nice. And I could happily end my review here, couldn't I? Say, yep, nice, lovely, luxury car full of nice touches. It's great. It's a Rolls Royce. What more do you want? Buy one, let's all go home. But if I did that, I'd be missing out a few rather important things, including the way that this car goes. Because under that bonnet up front, you will find a 6.6 litre twin turbo V12 that makes 570 PS and a staggering 575 pounds-feet of torque. That's 780 Newton meters. And wouldn't it be a crime to waste it? Let's see. Whoa. Well, I had the power reserve gauge down to about 20% just there, and I can tell you, this thing moves. It's quick, really quick. Allow me to demonstrate. Right, let's get down to about 40 mile an hour, let's call it. Okay, and I've no idea what gear I'm in. I can't tell the car what to do. It does its own thing. I'm going to put my foot down. There's the power. There's 50 and there's 60. Rapid, this. Really rapid. And it's also quite nice to drive. Doesn't have the same amount of steering feel as the Wraith, but it's got more than you might expect of a car like this. Of course, it's very light. You would want it to be that way, but it's still communicative. Gives you a bit of confidence when you're in the bends, and okay, sure, you'll reach its limits fairly quickly, but it does a much better job. Yeah, no, that's the end of its abilities. It does a much better job than you might think. Naturally, no matter what you're doing, the ride quality is also sensational, because here this car sits on a set of air suspension that is effectively shared with the Phantom, as are the electricals, a system that they call FlexRay. See, I told you, this isn't just a 7 Series in a fancy frock. I am having a whale of a time driving this thing. It's beautiful. It's a fabulous place to be, and it just relaxes you. Yeah, you can keep some pace up with it, but it was never ever going to be a sports car. You don't expect that of it. What it is, though, is a really rather nice and luxurious thing to spend your time in. Then, when you do want a little bit to go, it will give you all of that and then some more. And today, one of these could be yours for just over £60,000. A really good, nice Series 1 from a Rolls Royce dealer with a warranty of some description, £80,000. If you would like the later, slightly nicer looking and better equipped Series 2, then you're talking about more like £90,000 to £100,000. But you can have a car like this, which when new would have cost £250,000 for 60 to 70 grand. And this is not just something that I'm going to get to experience, because if you fancy the idea of spending a bit of time in the back of a Rolls Royce, David has this car for his business. It's called Connect Limos. It's based in Surrey, and he has a selection of luxury vehicles, also some classics and some sporty stuff too, and he is available to ferry you to your event in the car of your choosing for a fairly reasonable rate. He's a lovely chap. I've known him for a little while, and he is a friend of the channel. So if you're in the Surrey area or thereabouts and in need of some fine transport, I'll put his details in the description down below, and be sure to tell him that I sent you. And this gets us onto the final element of today's video. You see, today, to buy a Porsche Taycan Turbo, which when new would have cost maybe 130 to 140,000 pounds, would be a similar amount, 50 to 70 grand. Now, okay, these have depreciated in overall terms a lot more. They started at over 200, but they've now more or less settled. Their prices haven't changed for quite some time, and I think they're not going to for a while either. Simply put, there are many other older Rolls Royces that are not much cheaper than these, and that's going to mean that the price of the Ghost has to stay where it is. It's a relatively usable, dependable, modern car that I would never want to own without a warranty. Not really for things going wrong, but more the cost of them when they do. However, anecdotally, they seem to be relatively well-behaved cars. And I say that in the context of things like a 7 Series, which we all know is expensive to maintain, but in a lot of ways, you'd hope a Rolls-Royce might be a bit better, if only for the fact it never got as cheap as the 7 Series did. And yes, sure, this is going to drink a fair bit, but if you want to do any amount of mileage in a Taycan, that's going to involve going to public chargers. And while I'm not going to try and make the claim that running one of those is as expensive as one of these, because it's not, I think if you were to look at the overall cost of ownership over, say, 3 or 4 years and maybe 20 to 30,000 miles, I don't think there is really that much in it. And I do believe that the Taycans are going to continue depreciating. Now really, you could replace the word Taycan here with just about any other expensive electric vehicle of your choice. Even something that was a lot cheaper to begin with, for example, a Tesla Model 3, well, those could easily shed £30,000 in about 3 or 4 years. And realistically, I couldn't see running one of these costing more than that. I just can't. Even if you were warranting yourself and it still went wrong, I don't think you'd spend that much money. And while I'm going to stop shy of calling this a no-brainer, and I will concede that the likes of a Taycan would certainly outperform this, I think you've got to stop and think that something has gone a little bit wrong in the world for a 10-year-old V12 Rolls Royce to make just as much financial sense as a nice modern-day electric Porsche. But it is true, isn't it? And it may not be forever. With luck, things might correct themselves, electric cars might start to make sense again. But right now, we've found ourselves in this really unusual situation where the electric car is not doing quite so well, people aren't interested in them. And the problem, of course, that I think electric cars are having right now is that as they are developing so rapidly, what one day was cutting-edge, brilliant technology, 5 minutes later is old hat. Rolls-Royce, though, knew a long time ago how to be classy. And the thing about class is that it's permanent. In 30 years, I could drive one of these and say, it's still a proper Rolls-Royce. Because it will be. I've no doubt the new Spectre is amazing, and apparently they're selling loads of them, and I'm sure it actually is a very good fit for the brand. And I wager in 30 years people might be maybe even more interested in one of these because it has a nice big V12 engine in it. But whatever way you look at it, the bloody good car this could cost me a lot of money today. Do you think I should buy a Ghost? I'm tempted. I've got to do sensible things in my life at the minute. I'm trying to be an adult. That's why I'm selling cars. But I keep looking at these and going, ooh, I kind of fancy that. Comment down below if you want it to happen. And of course, tell me what your thoughts are on this. Would you have one? Would you have a Bentley Flying Spur instead? I wouldn't. These are way more comfortable than the new Flying Spur. I would have an old one, because if you've only got sort of 30 or 40 grand to spend, don't buy a Rolls Royce. The Bentleys would make a lot more sense at that point. But at this, oh, I think one day, just because I have to own a Rolls Royce. I'd like it to be a Phantom, but I think maybe I should start here. Anyway, That's enough from me. I want to say a big thanks to all of you for watching, and of course to David for bringing his lovely car out. And of course, don't forget, if you want to see what this car is like from the best seat in the house, don't forget to give David a call. Anyway, I want to say a big thanks to all of you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.